Rolling? How's everybody doing? Top notch, right? All right, good. So, ready for a little project management. Tonight we're going to talk about this thing called integration management. What in the world? It's chapter 4, by the way. How many of you actually had a chance to read chapter 4? Everybody got your books okay? Awesome. Good job. So, with as many of you reading the chapter, what is integration management and whose responsibility is it? So, Cameron, what is integration management? Perfect. Yeah, it's looking across all of the process groups, basically looking across the project, sometimes even before the work begins. It's an opportunity to think about how in the world are we going to manage this project? How big is it? So it's a fairly high-level view. It's like flying over the project, first thing in the morning, early in the life cycle, trying to figure out, do we have the right skills? Do we have the right tools? Is everybody rowing in the same direction? And so integration management, this is one of the newer knowledge areas. You may recall last week we talked about process groups and knowledge areas. What's a knowledge area? You remember what some of the knowledge areas are? Aaron, what's a knowledge area other than integration management, clearly? Remember some of the other ones?
Knowledge area includes... Are you talking about like subject manager expert and then procurement project team and all that? Or?
No, subject matter expert is typically a person, a specialist that we would call on. So knowledge areas, anybody want to help out? Adam, you want to help him out? What's a knowledge area? Talked about last week. How many are there? Anybody, Mike?
6.
10, actually. Yeah, good guess. 10. So, knowledge areas, what are they? Some of the knowledge areas. Anybody in the back? Pepe, anybody? Alex?
Like the scope, time, cost, quality, hiring management, communications, risk, procurement.
Absolutely, yeah. Time management, cost management. Knowledge areas are different things, different areas of the project that often require sometimes special skills. When it comes to time management, or they're now going to be calling it schedule management. I mean, there are schedule specialists out there, and that's what they oftentimes will focus on, especially on a large project. So when it comes to managing the schedule, it's a knowledge area. It takes a different set of skills to really understand the overall duration of the project, the critical path of the project, things like that. We're going to talk about those in lectures 6 and 7. But cost management, clearly, that takes a different set of skills. Oftentimes in the world of project management, many very experienced project managers often don't have a lot of financial experience. I was fortunate through IBM. At the time, I didn't think so. But I was promoted to a technical program management position at IBM in Chicago. Didn't necessarily want to live there, but they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And when I got there, I was there within a first month. The personal computers had just come out in 1981. This was 1984. I had a personal computer and had kind of tried to learn a little bit about basic programming, Fortran, some of that. So my boss came in and he introduced me to my new manager. And he said, "This is Bill, he's your manager." And Bill was what they called plans and controls manager. He had a group of financial specialists. And I made what could have been a career-limiting comment. I said, here's my new manager. It's Bill. He's a plans and controls manager, so that means finance. So I was fairly young at the time, and I said, there's one thing I never wanted to be when I grew up, and that's a bean counter. I had no desire to be a financial manager. Knew nothing about it. Can barely add at the time. So, here I'm all those technical skills, project management skills, but no financial background. So cost management does require very unique skills, and that's why it's a knowledge area in itself. But, of course, the response was, you are one. I said, I never wanted to be a bean counter, and the response is, you are one. So for the next 4.5 years, I managed budgets for 26 branch offices and 2 regional offices in the Chicago area. And it was a great, it turned out to be a really great experience, just learning about the financial side of the business, because, again, a lot of very experienced project managers have very little financial skills, very little accounting skills. And it's very important to be able to manage cost on your project. In IBM, we had what we call blue dollars. There's green dollars. You got a checkbook, you balance the checkbook, all of that. And we'll talk more about this during cost management, chapter 7. But financial management takes a certain set of skills. And in IBM, we used blue dollars, which was more internal dollars. So it's not like balancing a checkbook or writing a check to pay Anastasia for her consulting skills or whatever. It was all about tracking hours. As a project manager, I had claim codes that I could authorize different team members to use, and they would claim their hours against my project. We call it project accounting. And every week or whenever I wanted, I could run a report that told me how many hours were being charged against my project. So it's very important to understand cost management. Other knowledge areas, HR management you mentioned, procurement, contracts and procurement. So each knowledge area takes a different set of skills. And we talked about the 5 process groups. Anyone remember those? Kevin, does that ring a bell at all? 5 process groups. These are important. The reason I'm bringing them up again, because they're the framework. We talked about framework in the first night of class a little bit, and then more last week. So these are project framework. And so the 5 process groups. Yes, sir. Aaron.
Can I just say it?
Certainly, go for it.
Initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and closing.
Perfect, yeah. And we'll touch on that again tonight just as a quick review. But process groups are just groups of processes. Things that we need to do early in the project lifecycle, like initiating a new project. Developing the project charter, things like that. You've already started down that path. So, and then planning the project, and then executing the project, directing the work, and so on. And then monitoring and controlling, what I call the mac and cheese. It's all about keep an eye on the project. Are we on track and things like that. So the 5 process groups, if any of you plan to take a PMP exam someday through PMI, the Project Management Professional, 200 multiple choice questions, all wrapped around and aligned with those 5 process groups. If you're thinking about an associate level PM certification someday, those are aligned horizontally with the knowledge areas. So that's how the questions typically are laid out. If you have your textbook handy, turn to page 78 and 79. There's a very important map in there that shows those different processes. Across the top of that map are the 5 process groups. And I use these every day, every time I start a new project. Matter of fact, I'm wrapping a new project up tomorrow as we speak. We're launching a new online class, and so we've been frantically getting ready to close the project, and we're down to the wire as far as the final steps that need to be completed. Closing a project, that's one of the 5 process groups. So very important to understand the 5 process groups, to know those different knowledge areas. Do you have to use all of the 5 process groups on a project? Not really. Maybe you're just called in to initiate a new project. Maybe you're doing concept phase for the new satellite program. What are they calling it? CubeSat, right? So maybe you're just called in to do some concept reviews, initial design reviews, things like that. So projects are broken into phases. And so much of that is wrapped around those 5 process groups: initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and closing. Very many of the projects that I've worked on through the years were actually in one of those phases. For example, I would be called in to simply close down a project. And so if you're in the closing phase, do you need all of those knowledge areas, the 10 knowledge areas? High probability that you might use many or most of those. So they intertwine. If you can look at the map there on 78 and 79, it shows the mapping of where those processes fall within the 5 process groups, or horizontally, what we call swim lanes, across those 10 knowledge areas. So just wanted to reiterate, kind of review that a little bit before we get any further, because that's what project management is all about, is this framework, having the right skills at the right time, knowing how much time we have to complete the project, knowing how much funding or budget that we have to manage the project, and then trying to maintain the discipline to get us through the project life cycle. That's what project management is all about. And if you know those disciplines, You can apply those to any kind of project. Doesn't matter if it's aerospace, healthcare, transportation, construction, you name it. It plugs in nicely. Doesn't matter if you're planning a wedding or a church event. That's project management. Planning a vacation, a ski trip to Vail or Steamboat. That's a project. Definite start, definite end. Clearly defined goals and objectives. We want to have fun, but we don't want to get injured. So there's certain precautions that we take. How much of a budget do we have? Are we splitting the cost amongst other students, other travelers? What about accommodations? Getting a place to stay. All of those things are huge factors. It's a project, right? Make sense? Alrighty. So today we're going to talk about this thing called integration management, Chapter 4 of the Beginner's Guide. And it's really, as Cameron said, I think it was, it's all about bringing the project together, looking across all of those knowledge areas, looking across the 5 process groups and trying to determine, what this project's all about. Integration management really involves planning, how in the world we're going to manage the project. There are multiple processes. And Adam, you said 6 when I asked the question about knowledge areas. There are actually 6 processes, which is what you were probably thinking about. So good job. 6 processes associated with integration management. Again, integration management is what? Mary, what's integration management? It is, where does it fall in that scheme of things?
Stuff.
Right, yeah. Where does it fall in the 5 process groups? Any idea? Anybody? It's actually across all of them. So again, this is that first big look at the project, looking at how in the world we're going to integrate. Do we need formal change control? How often are we going to meet? Do we need volunteers? What about staffing? So it's really a huge umbrella, if you will, look at the project. Make sense? So integration management, think of that as the bigger picture across all 5 process groups, incorporating many of the knowledge areas, and it's all about looking at the project, charter to close, soup to nuts, what's it going to take to manage this thing. So integration management. Before we dive into the lecture, I would like to take some time to talk about your team projects. Unfortunately, I didn't have time because I'm launching this big project tomorrow, a ribbon cutting ceremony, so to speak. I didn't get a chance to review your charters, your project charters for your team. So who are the acting project managers for this past week? Okay, let's see, Mason. So tell us what your team is and what your proposed project, your charter, was all about. Okay.
We're doing the Fire Safe Community Center design aspect.
Design, okay, cool.
And the charter just laid out the deliverables that we wanted to accomplish.
Okay.
A bunch of stuff to deal with, like resources, how we're going to get them, budgeting, and a lot of constraints on what we need to work around to complete the design.
Okay. So team number 1, as I recall, right?
3.
3, okay. Design team? Okay. So, this is, so the charter really is an opportunity to kind of lay this out. The proposal, again, was your opportunity to sell the project. This is a great idea. Here's why we want to do this. Sign here. The charter is the next step in the process that says, okay, here's a little more detail about the project. Here's maybe a rough idea what we think it's going to cost. Here's the size and complexity, maybe some of the scope components of the project, et cetera. So it sounds like you got a good approach going there. So we gave you preliminary approval as a review committee last week. So of course I reserve the right to do final approval until I look through the charter and finalize that. But so far so good. Sounding like you're on the right track. So good job there. Who was another project manager for another team? Pepe?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What team were you again?
We're Team 5.
Team 5, okay. And you guys were bike race?
Yeah, we're doing a fundraising bike race.
Okay.
As Mason said, the charter was just defining what the project would be, which our goal is raising the $500,000.
Okay.
And having 3 races all set up, 2 evening concerts, and like the whole thing organized. There's a bunch of constraints that we put down in the...
Okay. Some potential risk, I hope, too. And
yeah.
Just some preliminary...
Like having the day of the race, like rain or like bad weather, that would like be a risk.
Okay.
having any injuries.
Okay. So how did the charter, Mason and Pepe, how did that process feel to you, kind of building a project charter? Did it make sense? Was it helpful? Was the template helpful as far as that building the charter?
Really helpful. I saw that it was like easy to get just a couple in, but the more that we worked on it, the more aspects and risks and constraints we saw.
Yeah.
So now we have a pretty defined objective.
Okay.
I think that helped us
Okay.
clarify some of it.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Pepe, because oftentimes when we get involved with any project, all of a sudden we start peeling the onion, so to speak. We pull a layer back and we find out, whoa, there's a lot more risk than we anticipated with this project. It was a bike race, for example. You've got weather, as Pepe mentioned. You've got all these risks that potentially could emerge. Construction. I rode in a bike race a few years back where at the last minute there was some road construction up Highway 34 from Loveland to Estes Park, and all of a sudden we're riding the bike race, and at the last minute when we registered, because I had trained with some friends of mine, we rode the route several times. We were very comfortable with the route, and all of a sudden on race day we got there and they said, oh, here's a new map. We're going to have to divert because of road construction. So all of a sudden, there's a change, and it was contrary to our training schedule and our route, and all of a sudden, hit this one turn that we had to make to avoid the construction. Bikers were like wandering around in this neighborhood, and the traffic control was minimal and a lot of confusion, and it really upset a lot of the riders because it was a major distraction for us because of that last minute change. So, managing change, huge part of project. So, Mason, anything you want to add as far as the charter itself, developing the charter?
I thought it was a useful template. It seemed like you had to do, I did in fact have to do a lot of research on budgeting things for especially the engineering parts and building it.
Okay.
Because there's not a lot of information on the contractors for that.
Right.
Other than that, it was very straightforward, I thought.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of it's just research, kind of gathering information, checking with your subject matter experts, that sort of thing, other team members. So you get a lot of synergy there in information gathering, very important. But back to what Pepe was saying, a lot of what we do when we manage projects is it's an iterative process. So we take this first step. Typically it's high level. The charter might be 4, 6, or 8 pages. Maybe we even glean some of the information from maybe we've got a contract that's been signed, or a legislative bill or something that is providing us guidance as to what this project's supposed to do. And so very often we have some what we call inputs, information that we take into consideration when it comes time to develop this charter. And then we can take that information forward. As mentioned, iterative process, And there's another term or phrase, you've probably already seen it. If you haven't, you will soon, called progressive elaboration. Does that ring a bell? Yeah, it's that one step forward, learning more about the project, and then adjusting accordingly, maybe updating documentation, that sort of thing. So progressive elaboration, it's learning more about the project. When do we know the most about the project? Beginning, middle, or end?
And
At the end, right? Absolutely, when the project's done. So hopefully the closer to the end that we get, the more accurate our reports are as far as progress, status reports, budgets, things like that, certainly schedule. So a lot of things to think about, okay? So how about other teams? Who are the other acting project managers? Mary, what's your team number?
We're Team 2.
Team 2. And you were build team?
We were design team.
Design team, okay.
We had a fancy space probe. I guess
yeah.
the hardest part was deciding on our project.
Yeah.
But once we did that, the template I thought was pretty straightforward.
Okay, good.
And then I think that I really spent the most time doing research.
Okay.
But other than that, it was straightforward. And I guess it was sort of difficult to try and narrow down the project. Make sure we didn't get too involved, and made sure we didn't get something that was too much of a hassle. Just really trying to narrow our focus. I spent the most time on that in research.
Okay. And that's an excellent point, Mary, because very often you're handed a project. Alex, go forth and deliver. We've got this problem. Go fix it. All of a sudden you get a team together, and it's early in the project life cycle, so there are a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty. And we talked about that, I think, in the first night of class about the uncertainty that often exists early in the cycle, in the life cycle. So you have to make assumptions. You have to, do research. You have to collaborate pretty extensively sometimes to try and figure out what is this project all about? How big is it? How much can we break it into smaller chunks as far as phases? We call that the work breakdown structure, and we'll talk more about that here pretty quick, actually, next couple of weeks. So good job. Anyone else who's the other acting PMs? Yes, Alex.
So we also did the bike race for Team 4
Okay.
for the fundraising event for the community center. But I think overall the template was just a really fantastic resource. I think the hardest part was just thinking of all the different nuances even that could go into it. So for instance, like what are the different risks that could go on with a bike race versus
Right, yeah.
just playing a bike race, as well as actually
Yeah.
interesting to try and think of all the different aspects.
Sure, yeah. And the tendency, especially if you're a good project manager, have good project management instincts, the tendency is to really get into the weeds, get into the details, think about all the risks, think about how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost, how much we're going to charge for tickets, all of those things. And that's a trap, a speed bump that often occurs on real projects, because what you want to do is take it in baby steps. And really that's what this course is all about. We're going to take each step of the way, build on it throughout the semester. So, but it's a very natural, very common occurrence for us to want to really dig in right away and get all the answers right away. And all of a sudden you're in what I call in the weeds. You're really into the details, devil's in the details. So all of a sudden, you're very distracted with little things like the cost of the tickets for, the bike race and things like that. And all of a sudden, you're losing the focus on the bigger picture. So, that's one tip I'll offer you when it comes to managing projects. A lot of what we do is really just try and organize the work in such a way where we're not, getting in too much detail. We want to start here, build on it. Some people like to do the build-up chart bottom to top, but in my view, visually, the bottom is the foundation, and that's the bigger picture. So I kind of like to start up here in the charter, do the, take it step by step, the project management plan, each step of the way growing, what we know about the project, and ultimately getting us to the bigger picture. Make sense? Awesome. And let's see, who else? Yes, sir. Ryan?
Yeah, so I'm PM for Team 1, and we're doing the building process for the Fire Safe Community Center. And I thought it was really useful that for the homework assignment, 3 of us had already done that area.
Yeah.
Because then we already kind of had enough information between the 3 people that did that, where we could just implement all the risks that we had all noticed, because we all noticed slightly different things.
Sure.
It made it super easy to just throw it all together.
Okay, good job. Yeah, that synergy really helps. That's why I like having the team assignments throughout the semester. It's really giving you the opportunity to compare notes and to learn from one another, because really project management is what I call a shared learning environment. No matter how long I've been, and I learn, every time I teach a class or every time I manage a project, I learn more and more about, the different approaches, different tools, different processes, things like that. So good point. Okay. And is that it? It seems like we have one more team. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we did the fire station redesign one. We kind of just build on everything, what everyone said, did all the same. Really big thing was looking at all the risks, and then also looking at our scope, kind of what we wanted to do. And then that kind of tied into our deliverables and stuff that we wanted to have by the very end. Kind of we limited ourselves to strictly the design aspect, and so that was kind of made sure to limit ourselves there and not go beyond that.
Not go beyond. Okay, cool. And what was your name again?
Sam.
Sam. Okay, thanks, Sam. Awesome. Okay, did I get all the teams? And again, you've got your preliminary approval for the project. Once I review the charters and give you the final okay, then it's time to rock and roll. We'll do that pretty quick, myself and the grader, just so that you're not wondering if you're approved or not. So go ahead and assume that your project is approved, and assume that we're going to build on that throughout the semester. and we'll get through those charters as quick as we can, give you any feedback on that as well. So far, so good? Okay. So just a quick note, if you are, and actually the two distance teams are 4 team members each. I think in the classroom where everyone's at 5. There is a chance, because I think we have 31 people in the classroom. So is there anyone that's not assigned to a team in the classroom? Okay, because I think there's 31 people fully enrolled now. So that means we've got one person that may not be assigned. Okay, so keep in mind that you've got, as a guide, you've got the tracking sheet or the log sheet as far as your project control book entries. So you've got a 5 team member sheet that'll pop up occasionally throughout the semester. It'll be in one of the lecture folders, and I'll ask you maybe a couple, 3 times during the semester to update that so that at a glance you know who the acting project manager is and what date they performed whichever assignment that's there. Okay? And the 4 team member groups will have 1 less assignment for each half of the semester. It's because they have fewer people. Okay? Questions on any of that stuff? How to track it? It's important to kind of keep an eye on who the acting PM. Just another reminder, make sure, if you're the acting PM, make sure that you enter your name and the team number in your document. So every document that's turned in, homework or project control book inputs, every document should have the acting project manager's name, and in the file name itself that you upload to D2L, make sure your name and your team number is in the file name as well. That way, at a glance, we can see which team you're working on and who's on deck as far as the acting PM. Make sense? Alrighty. So, looks like we've got a good distribution of different project teams. We've got design, build. We've got a couple fundraising teams. I haven't heard yet from the distance teams as far as their preference, but I will. I should have those charters in D2L, so I'll be able to see what their preferences are as well as far as the type of project that they're going to run. So, questions? Okay, integration management. What is it and why do we care? It's really it involves managing the whole project across all 5 process groups as mentioned. It's really all about, it's all about making trade-offs among competing demands. One of the biggest challenges that we face as project managers is all of these all these, these roadblocks, these speed bumps, if you will, constraints, budget constraint, time constraint, resource constraint. Can anyone think of a time-constrained project? Tristan, does that ring a bell at all? A time-constrained project. What do you suppose that would be?
Just meeting deadlines. There's a certain project sponsor, whoever is set a certain deadline.
Perfect. Yeah, it's time constrained. I've got to have to deliver by a certain date. Any big projects that come to mind that would be time constrained? Yes.
Apollo 11.
Yeah, Apollo 11. Yes, Lillian.
The Olympics.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking about as well. The Olympics. Typically, we know sometimes 8 years in advance, to the day and almost to the minute that the torch is supposed to be lit. So it doesn't matter if the paint is still wet on the bleachers or whatever. Time constrained. It has to happen by this date, by this time. Cost constrained, pretty straightforward. You've only got so much money to spend. And resource constrained. What in the world is that, Eric? If you have a resource constrained project, what does that tell you?
Limited resources and available.
Absolutely. Yeah, you may not have the right people at the right time or the right rates. Very, very often the case. I've seen both sides of that. I mean, as a project manager, you want to lobby for, negotiate for the best possible resources, the people that really know their stuff, right? But typically those subject matter experts come at a higher rate. And so you may have a budget constraint where you can only hire people on your project of a certain band level. And I've actually had to go back to support managers and say, hey, thanks for assigning Andrew to my project. He's a top dog. He really knows his stuff. But he comes at a higher rate, and I can't afford that. I'm going to have to find someone else that perhaps doesn't have the experience, doesn't have all the years that Andrew has. So I've actually had to go out to functional managers and negotiate for less than the top consultants on a project, which is kind of counterintuitive. You want the best of the best on your project team, but you can't always afford them. They come at a much higher rate. So it's it's back to the triple constraints, right, Daniel? It's all about time, cost, and scope, right? Making sure we have the right people with the right skills and all of that to be able to get the job done. So real-world meaning, integration management is really understanding what's the problem that needs to be solved. Is there a business need? Is there a safety issue? Is there regulatory requirements that surface that force us to engage in a certain type of project, even though it's going to cost, like the auto industry is a prime example. All the latest cars have these lane alert features and auto braking, if you get too close to the next vehicle in front of you. Hey, those are great features. They come at a great expense. So a safe driver, they may not want to spend an extra $5,000, $8,000 for those extra features, but because of the competition and because there's so many people out there that are distracted nowadays, those safety features are becoming more predominant. So even though it's adding cost to the vehicle, it's a feature that they feel is appropriate and certainly well worthwhile. So it adds cost. So they've kind of gone beyond. They've looked at needs. Safety is a big factor. So they said, well, cost is not the constraint here. Safety is the higher priority. So all of a sudden the cost of the vehicle goes up. So a lot of things to consider on your projects when it comes to that as far as needs of the business. So what is the problem to be solved? Is it a safety issue, or is it we need to build market share, and so on? Managing demands and constraints, the old adage, on time, on budget. But, at the end of the day, we've got a lot of things to worry about on the project, different risks. At the end of the day, it's all about managing good, effective two-way communications. And lastly, working as a team. That's one of the 3 takeaway points that we talked about on the first night. Anyone remember the other 2 takeaway points? Who's that? Pepe, good job. Stay focused on the end objectives. Good job. Number 1. Number 2 was? Yes, sir.
Tools and resources.
Yeah, good job, Andrew. Use the tools and resources available. That includes subject matter experts, team members, consultants, or even using the templates. When I say use the tools and resources available, using those awesome templates that Dr. Gary Evans developed and is allowing us to use here in the classroom. Great tools when it comes to managing the project. Early in my project life cycle, I can remember working weekends, in Phoenix, Arizona, trying to figure out how to develop a project charter. There weren't a lot of, I started when I was 6, so there weren't a lot of tools out there. So I found myself having to develop and create and kind of wing it on how to build a charter, how to build, a risk plan and things like that. Nowadays, there's some amazing tools available to you. Many are cheap, either low or no cost, shared source. So a lot of things that are available to us. Okay? So tools and resources available. So, whoops. Okay, so as far as integration management, bigger picture, early in the cycle, a lot of unknowns. So when it comes to integration management, there are 6 processes. Adam, I think it was Adam mentioned that. And first is developing the charter. This authorizes the project or phase to begin. It really formally recognizes the project. When I was working in finance, a high-level manager came to me one day and he says, hey, I need 2 more people on my project. I said, okay, are they funded? Well, that's why I'm coming to you, he says. You're finance. You're going to fund these 2 additional people for my project. I said, do you have a charter? No. Do you have a contract? Do you have an agreement? Do you have a handshake? Do you have anything that formally authorizes this project? And the answer was no, I don't. Well, as luck would have it, about 6 months into the project life cycle, the customer said, hey, great work, we'll take it from here. So they never paid for the research and the early development of this project. It was a conceptual design concept as far as software, and it was a banking customer, and they had basically come to IBM and said, hey, wouldn't it be great if there was this product? Would you consider at least doing a concept phase for the software product? And this manager said, sure, we can do that. He dove in and he assigned like 6 people to the project, and he wanted 2 more. At the end of the day, they never had a charter. They never had a contract. No handshake. Nothing. And at the end of the day, the customer said, hey, thanks, we'll see you later. Never paid a penny for that. Nowadays, we realize, and this was early, obviously early in the time frame, but nowadays we realize, hey, we ought to have a charter or something that authorizes this project. Otherwise, it's not official. So that's what this does. Once we have the authorization, boom, second step, develop the project management plan. That's our next assignment. Then we figure out how to execute, how to direct and manage the work of the project, monitoring and controlling the work, performing integrated change control, and ultimately closing, and then celebrate, right? So this is integration management. It's the only process group, or excuse me, the only knowledge area that has processes across all 5 process groups is shown here. So integration management, chapter 4 of the beginner's guide. Notice the distribution of those 6 processes, fairly evenly split across all 5 process groups, initiating, planning, and so on. So we're here. Another thing to remember, currently, and this is going to change, but currently, every process, this part doesn't change, every process has inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. So if the project is to develop a project charter, we have certain inputs, information that we take into consideration, like a statement of work. We have tools and techniques. Maybe we bring in some consultants, expert judgment, and then we ultimately generate or develop this thing called the charter, the project charter. That's what you just completed. That's the output. Typically, and this is the current part, currently, very often, the output of one process becomes the input of the next process. And so the charter becomes the kind of a stepping stone with a little more information about the project. I run it through my experts, and the output in this case is what? Lillian, what's the output of the project management plan process? It is the plan document itself, right? So pretty straightforward. That becomes the input, the information that I take into consideration for the next process, which is directing, managing the work. I have some meetings. I have some experts, team members. The outputs are the deliverables of the plan. So here we plan the work, and here we're working the plan. See, we're directing and managing the work of the project. We've got the approved deliverables. Maybe there's some change requests. We're updating project documents based on new information. So there's a logical flow, believe it or not, when it comes to these processes. And that helps us a lot along the way. It gives us a roadmap. Okay? So what are deliverables? We talked about that, I think, a little bit on the first night. So what are deliverables? Gage, what's a deliverable on which team are you on?
I'm on Team 2.
Team 2, which is?
Space Probe.
Space Probe. So what would be some deliverables of the project itself?
They're just kind of benchmarks along the way that show that you're starting to reach the goal, the end goal, I suppose. Okay, benchmarks. A deliverable could be a document that would, like the budget, could be a deliverable. I create the budget, I go to Lillian, she reviews and approves, boom, that becomes, you called it a benchmark, I would call it a milestone. Becomes a check mark and allows us to go on to the next phase. Okay? Keep in mind you've got project deliverables and product deliverables. A product deliverable might be a set of blueprints for the design team. A project deliverable is going to be like the project management plan document itself would be a project deliverable. So keep in mind there are 2 different types of deliverables. Typically they come together as you go down the path. Okay? So deliverables could be a set of blueprints, maybe a bill of materials list. So if we're going to, on a construction project, we're going to build this fire safe community center. Our design team's going to come up with a set of blueprints. They're going to hire an architect to do so. They're also going to have a specialist, a consultant, giving us a bill of materials list, the types of materials we need to do the construction. And then at some point we have to apply for the building permit.
before we can ever pound a nail, right? Before we can ever set a form, before we ever dig a shovel in the ground, we have to have a building permit. And so, we have to go to city planning, and we would take a set of deliverables forward. Could be several. And then once we obtain, one of the activities on my work breakdown structure and on my schedule is to obtain the building permit. The assumption within our projects here in the classroom is that that activity is the responsibility of the construction or the build team. Okay? The bill of materials, the blueprints, design team, I take those over to the build team to apply for the building permit. And once you obtain the permit, that becomes a milestone, allows you to continue to the next process. So look for check marks here as far as milestones. Okay? Can be summary level, can be detailed typically. So you can have many deliverables that feed a milestone. Okay? So, speaking of which, clicker quiz. Whoops, back up. Boom. So, Charlie Baker. Charlie Bravo. Anyone that doesn't have a clicker tonight? Everybody got their clicker?
What was the code again?
CB, Charlie, Bravo.
No, I'm not. Quick.
So everyone's got your clicker?
No, my clicker's not working.
Two clickers not working.
Is it, you put in CB, Charlie?
I did.
Bravo?
I just didn't realize I don't have any more battery. Like, shuts off, so I guess they're dead.
Take them out and switch them in their order, and then put them back in. And it'll probably work for
Okay. So, so it looks like we got everybody but maybe one or two. Okay. We'll give them a chance to switch here.
working nonstop.
Oh, I just keep
So is it, okay. Yeah, I would, risk management, right? You want to always carry extra batteries. I have extra in my backpack if you need them, but. Holding up the project. Looks like we got 30, let's see. So that's everybody. Okay, awesome. So, final answer, closing, boom. And the envelope, please. Okay, the best answer here is D, all of the above. We talked about milestones. Major activity when complete allows the project to go to the next phase. Something you deliver often to a sponsor or customer can contain multiple deliverables. Actually, B is not a very good answer. Something you deliver to the sponsor would be a deliverable. But certainly the milestone is the check mark once delivered. So best answer is D in this case. B is probably the softest of the answers. But D, all of the above. A lot of things that go into a milestone. A is certainly a good answer, so don't feel bad. But D is the best. Questions? Okay. Okay. Project management's been around since the beginning of time. You read in the textbook about Mount Rushmore, and the pyramids of Egypt, Great Wall of China. Project management's really been around for a lot of years, a lot of decades. But oops, we lost one of our screens. So you'd think we'd be pretty darn good at managing projects. You learn from lessons learned. You learn what works, what doesn't. So. The weird thing is about a third of projects fail. There's a company out there called the Standish Group, and they track project success. You know, projects that succeed, what are the things that make them successful? Projects that fail, why in the world did they fail? And they even track what they call challenges for projects. And there's a list. It's really the top 100 list. I love where they have these reports. It's in the Chaos University. So Standish Group, Chaos University, they're very proud of their reports now. I used to track these pretty regularly just to get an idea of why projects fail. What do I need to look out for to make my project successful? And now they charge thousands of dollars for these reports. That's that valuable. But in the list changed. I just have the top 5 here from whenever I took the snapshot. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of reasons why projects fail. Either the scope was unclear, maybe the sponsorship changed, or very often you see high-level managers that really are not totally committed to a particular project. And so maybe you don't have the team members with the right skills to do the project. So there's a lot of different reasons why projects fail. Yes, sir?
Can you expand on the number 1 reason, user inputs were inadequate?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. And I can give you a very specific example. I worked on one of my projects. It was a software development project, and the design team was actually formatting the login screen for data input. And so they made a decision that here's the information, here's the data that we need, and here's the layout of this login screen for the end user community. It was actually a help desk that was going to use this particular software, as far as tracking problems and change requests. And so they made the design without actually talking to or working with the user, the end user team. And so the design, the software developers were very proud of the work that they'd done and said, look, Alex, you're a help desk manager. Look at all of the things that we've done for you. And Alex looked at it and said, what's this? It makes no sense to me. And so, what should have happened in this case was that we should have engaged Alex or other subject matter experts, the user community, at least representatives from the community, to get input and say, hey, if we build it, will you come? And when you walk in the door, what are you looking for? What's the logical sequence? At IBM, we actually had what we called a usability lab. And we would bring people in. We would design a new device, and we would bring people in and say, okay, turn the device on. Well, there are no labels, no on-off switch, listing or whatever. So we would do usability to see where they went to turn on this device, and what symbols made sense to the end user community and things like that. Well, you typically go for the red button, and it's usually easy access somewhere in plain sight. So that's what the usability lab would determine is, where's the end user going to go when they're asked to perform a step, turn the device on, turn it off, whatever. So not including the user community as far as their input. In this particular example, it was a failed project because the design didn't really meet the needs of the end user community. Does that make sense?
Is that usually more, from your opinion, a lack of users giving input to, say, like the project manager, or is that more the lacking of the project manager and the team as a whole listening to user input?
Yeah, it could be either or. It could be a little bit of both. I've seen it on projects where the team was, especially if it's time constrained. I've got to get this done in 3 months. And so I need to move forward. I don't have time to stop and ask the end users what their preference is, because very often it's time consuming. You get this wish list. I'm facing that now. I'm working with 5 different instructors, and they have different opinions about how certain things should be done. And so, it's very time consuming to kind of plow through that to get to some form of consensus. So excellent question, though. I appreciate that, Andrew. Did I answer your question? Okay, awesome. Any other questions? Awesome. So at the end of the day, it really doesn't, if you look at even the top 100 reasons why projects fail, at the end of the day, it's usually because of lack of project management discipline. Very often projects fail because I didn't take the time to gather the input from Alex and her team as far as what works well as far as data entry, our end user acceptance, things like that. Maybe we're in such a big hurry we don't have time to do that usability test. So very often, the specifications are unclear or changing. Very often we have challenges as far as time frame, and you've got different levels of support as far as executive levels. Some support the project, others don't, and all of a sudden you've got conflicts on, priorities as far as your given project. And so it's a constant challenge. But at the end of the day, if you've got good project management discipline, you're communicating well, you're looking at the risk, you're evaluating the risk. If I don't get input for this project, the finished product is likely to fail. And I've had cases where the project team was raving about what a great job they did, only to have the sponsor or the end user say, this is not what we had in mind. Matter of fact, a good friend of mine, she's written many books. She's a high-level project manager and fellow instructor. And she tells about a software development project where it was a 12-month project. Her team did such a great job developing this product. They were so proud of it, and they took it to the customer only to have and they were like 5 months into the project life cycle. They presented it, demonstrated it to the customer, and the customer sat back and said, what's this? This is not at all what we had in mind. So what's the problem there? They clearly didn't get end-user input. But what's the other big problem? Lack of communications, good one. What else? Another big one. Yes, Mason? Yeah, lack of specifications. Yes. Poorly defined scope. But there's another big one I'm looking for here. Yes, sir? Could be. Conflicts between team members definitely could be a factor. A difference of opinions. Gage?
Deliverable too far out. Should have had some steps earlier.
Yeah, checkpoints earlier. Good point. You're really close to the one thing I'm looking for here. Anybody, Ryan? 12-month project. When did they present to the customer? Aaron?
Or talk to the client before.
Yeah, communications we touched on. I think you're on the right track. But at the end of the day, you don't wait 5 months on a 12-month project to put it in front of the customer. You check. I think that's where you're going. One of you were going with checkpoint earlier and often on the project. Okay. In the old days, we used to develop the project scope, get it approved, put it in the drawer. Nowadays, the view is you need to validate the scope along the way. Get the original approval, but after every deliverable, hey, is this what you had in mind? Put those blueprints out there. Is this what you had in mind? If not, we need to know before we continue down the path. Otherwise, you're wasting a lot of time and energy, certainly a lot of cost, if you have to restart the project. And in this case, what's the other big risk here? In the example that I just gave you, what is the customer's view, Mike? What's the customer's view? 5 months into the 12-month project, they look at the work and they go, this is not what I had in mind. So what does that tell you? Yes, sir?
I think one thing would be, I'm halfway through this project, I've already spent a lot of money, and I'm not even getting what I want.
Exactly. So customer satisfaction and the trust and confidence that the customer has in you to manage the project really slips significantly. So, that's why that communicating early and often is very important. Making sure that there's no confusion. Checking those deliverables along the way. Is this what you had in mind? Yes, no, maybe. If yes, sign here, and then you move on, right? Okay, good job. So, lack of project management discipline, communicating, organizing the work, validating the scope along the way, managing the risks, reporting the progress, hugely important. And that's the same on any type of a project. So there's no real magic there. It's something that we do. So let's talk about challenges and skills needed. So think about your team project. So we're going to break into teams, take about 10 minutes, and excuse me, and think about the challenges that we just talked about. But more importantly, think about the skills necessary to be successful as a project manager. Okay, and we've already hit on a couple of those. what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this around a break. So 10 minutes for the break, 10 minutes for the exercise. Your choice as to when you do each of those, but we're going to debrief at 20 minutes till the hour. So it's 6:40. 5, 10. It's 6:45. We'll regroup and debrief the discussion. Okay, it's 6:45. So 10-minute break, 10 minutes for the discussion. Your choice. See you at 6:45. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Remember that commercial, right? Okay, let's regroup. Let's go ahead and start the recording, please. Okay, thank you, thank you. I asked the question, can you hear me now? I just want to let you know, I just heard on the news, I think it was yesterday, there's a new scam going on where, someone will call you at random. They may have your name or certain information, and they'll say, by the way, can you hear me okay? And you'll say yes. And the scam is that they will record your yes and then somehow start billing your charge card and stuff like that. And then when you contest that particular charge, they'll play that back to you that, hey, here's where we asked you the question about this charge, and you said yes. So be aware of that. If someone calls you at random, and they ask you, can you hear me okay, or can you hear me now? You just hang up the phone, okay? So I digress, but there's so many scams out there nowadays, it's crazy. So now let's talk about the team exercise. We talked about challenges, that we often face on projects before we dove into the exercise. So what are some of the skills necessary to allow you to be successful as a project manager? So let's just kind of do a verbal debrief. Any volunteers? Yes, Ryan.
Do you just want one trade at a time?
Why don't you give me 2 or 3, and then we'll kind of compare notes as we go. I'll tell you what, give us all 5, top, and then we'll kind of use that as our benchmark. And if you want to would you mind capturing these 5 on the board, and we'll look for check marks as we go around the room, okay?
Like write them down?
Yeah, let's just go ahead and write them down, and then we'll look for check marks as we go around the room. Skills necessary. I do this for a reason, so you can erase what we've got here. And then just capture your 5, and we'll use those as kind of a benchmark as we go around the room. Okay, so go for it, Ryan.
So the first one was communication.
Yep, communication skills, good one. Here, you want to use black? Maybe there's a...
Yeah, I think this one's working okay.
Okay. So communication skills, next.
Organization.
Yep, good organizational skills, a must. Good job. Okay. Next.
Time management skills.
Okay.
Kind of close, but
Yep. Time management, good one.
Adaptability.
Okay.
And then leadership as well.
Okay, so adaptability and leadership. Yeah, good ones. Excellent. Okay, good job. So if you could just hang in there, appreciate it. And then as we go around the room, let's look for check marks. Okay, so who wants to go next? Yes, sir, Andrew.
Yeah. So we said both communication and organization skills.
Okay, a couple of check marks there. Top 2.
Yeah. And then a few others that we said were being a big picture thinker.
Okay.
Being charismatic. And being invested.
Being invested. Okay. Big picture, looking at the bigger picture, visionary kind of thing. Good job. And charismatic. Good. Yeah. Close enough. And last, invested. Yeah. Someone that's really in support of, full support of the project, even to the point of investing their time and energy. Good one. So we got a couple of check marks there. And the other, let's use that black one there. It's kind of hard to see that. I'm afraid the distant students might not be able to see that as well. So give us those check marks in black, if you would. Okay, next. Good job, Andrew. Next. Top 2, yeah. Okay, yes. Samuel.
So we had organization and communication as well.
Okay, top 2.
We had resilience.
Resilient. Okay, good job.
And then empathy.
Empathy, right? Okay, good one.
And critical
Critical thinking skills, that's a good one too. Yeah, you can go ahead and put it over there. A lot of some room for the check marks. Okay, good job. Yes, sir. Sam?
We have communication, organization, and time management as well.
Okay.
And then we have discipline, and then recognizing where members of the team excel.
Knowing strengths and weaknesses of your team members. Yeah, good job. So basically knowing your team would be a good one. Knowing strengths. Okay, cool. And yes, sir. Cameron.
Most of these are not so communication skills,
Okay.
leadership, organization, some big picture. And the only new one is
Being that's a good one. Yeah, being an advocate for your team. Cheerleader, right? Okay, good job. And let's see, one more, I think. Yes, Alex?
So we also had good communication and organization.
Okay,
As well as leadership.
good one.
And then we also had negotiating.
Oh, good one. Yeah, good one.
And I guess problem solving is probably close to critical thinking.
Yeah, problem solving, I think that's worth its own weight, for sure. Awesome. Did I miss any teams? Every team represented? Okay, thanks for your great scribe help here. So, I often get the question, why would I want to be a project manager? As you can see from the board, there are a lot of skills required for you to be successful. So why would I want to be a project manager in the first place? Just off the top of your head, Aaron, why would you want to be a project manager? I mean, there's a lot of skills that I need, right? You got to be a jack of all trades or a Jane of all trades, right?
You get paid more?
Potentially, yeah. Good answer. Good answer. Mike, what about you? Why would you want to be a project manager? I mean, there's a lot.
Kind of with being paid more, it's just moving up the ranks.
Yeah, I'm kind of about.
Project manager is usually higher
There's
up.
career potential, right? You know, moving up the ranks, as Mike said. What else? Mason?
Maybe to gain better business relationships.
Say again?
Maybe to gain better business relationships.
Yeah, exactly. Gain better business relationships. I mean, as a project manager, you're communicating, working with a lot of different levels. So good job. And Emily?
I was going to say you're at the heart of the project, so you get to see everything that goes on.
Perfect. Yeah, heart of the project, kind of get to have the opportunity to see the bigger picture, right? And then, sir?
If you're doing it right, you'll never get bored. It's the most interesting because you'll always have something to do.
Yeah, that's a good one. You know, people ask me, I was on a project in California, out in Silicon Valley one year, and I've been with IBM about 18 years, and people would come by. I was managing a huge project at the time, and people would come, strangers would come and sit, in my office and say, why would you've worked for IBM for how many years? 18 years. Wow, why would you ever want to work for a company for that long? And it's because pretty much what you're saying, I'm sorry, your name?
Adam, I'm sorry, I left my name.
Adam, yeah. What Adam said was basically the sense of accomplishment. I'll kind of paraphrase it a bit, but getting new opportunities, being able to work on different projects. In the 40 years I ended up working for IBM, I felt like a rookie. I felt like, I worked on, every couple of years I was on new projects, sometimes every 6 or 12 months, but huge opportunity to learn about so many different areas of the business, to meet so many different people and network and really build those relationships. So good job there, Patrick.
You have a vision, but you don't have the skills to execute it by yourself.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, you have the vision, but you may not have all the skills. And using the tools and resources available, as a project manager, you have the opportunity to bring in those skills, right? Good job, Patrick. A couple other hands I saw. Andrew.
I'd say one thing is this is like a way to be impactful in a project itself. Maybe this is one person's skill set that they'd be a great project manager, but they might be limited in other aspects of a project, right?
Okay.
So this is their way to be impactful.
So the word used is impactful. In influence, clearly as a project manager, you have a high degree of influence over the organization, over people, things like that. So huge sense of accomplishment, when you've got those check marks that we love. One more. Anybody else? Isaac, what about you? As far as why would you want to be a project manager with all these skills that you need to develop?
I guess like hone your skills, and then maybe you can use later on in the future, like career-wise, and make your own business. And
yeah. So hone your skills, as Isaac said, and allow you to kind of build your skill set over time and to make you more marketable, if nothing else. You know, back to the salary thing we discussed earlier, make you more more valuable to your organization, without a doubt. So good job. So a lot of different skills necessary to be successful. So envelope, please. Survey says that to be a good, successful project manager, you need good communication skills. So you all hit that one smack on the head. But I would add to that by saying good two-way communications. So being a good listener is also equally important. You know, being able to seek out the input from others, to take advantage of the strength and weaknesses of others within your organization. Being aware of that, without a doubt. Number 2, leadership. You all hit that one mostly. I say all. A couple of you hit leadership skills. That's what project management is all about, getting things done through others. So you need to demonstrate your leadership skills. Right, wrong, or indifferent, you are the project manager. The buck stops here. So you need to be able to exhibit good, strong leadership skills. What else? Let's see. Negotiations, good job there. Problem solving, being proactive. PMI loves the word being proactive rather than reactive. So it's all about solving problems. For those of you thinking about a PMP exam someday, over 100 questions of the 200 multiple choice questions on that exam are solving problems. You know, they give you a situation, a scenario, and they ask you, what would you do first? What would you do next? And so solving problems, very big. Good organizational skills, they call it lining up your ducks, looking at the bigger picture, definitely, and many, many more. There's a ton of skills that are very helpful to allow you to be successful. Now, the good news is you don't have to be an expert as a project manager. You don't have to be a tech wizard. You don't have to be top of your class as far as aerospace or whatever. You take your strengths and weaknesses. You look at your team members. You know, I had a team member who was excellent as far as customer satisfaction. Jim just had a way with customers that was beyond belief. So when I had customer sat issues, very often I would bring Jim as part of my team members into the meeting. He just had a great way to listen and to kind of calm the customer and things like that. And so the good news about project management is use the tools and resources available. If you've got a good negotiator, Eric is top-notch negotiator. I want to bring him into the meeting when it comes to maybe negotiating contracts or for more resources or more funding, et cetera. So a lot of things to think about there. Good job all around. You know, clearly a lot of skills. You don't have to be an expert in all of these. The good news is you can develop these skills over time, much like Isaac said. It's something, view this as a long-term investment as far as building your skills, being aware of the skills of others around you, certainly within your team, and being willing to call on them to help you out given the circumstances, you know, depending on their strengths as well. Okay? Make sense? Good job all around. So a round of applause, you guys. Yay! So following the processes, remember there are how many processes for integration management? There are 6. Good job, Pippi. There are 6. Remember the first one was to what? Develop the project charter. That's what you all did for your teams. So step 1. So you've got a project proposal. You put it out there. Looks good. Sounds good. Build me a charter. Now that's the authorization to begin. Next step. This is chapter 4, process number 2. Now that I've got the authorization, I've got the charter approved, the very next step, and you're going to do this for your team projects, is to develop a project management plan. Now, initially this could be 6 pages or 8 or 12 or 50 pages. You know, it's all about depending on where you're at in the project life cycle. So there's a template out there, but it's about planning the work. And many projects are audited. I've had many projects where they were up for audit or up for review. And the one thing they want to know is, do you have a plan? And then, of course, the second is, are you working the plan? And step 3 is show me. You show me how you're doing all that. So, developing the project management plan. The preliminary plan is typically 4 to 6 pages, maybe 8. And then you would further develop the plan over time. You would expand the project management plan even to include subsidiary plans. So what are some other plans that might be either addendums or attachments to your preliminary project management plan? So this is the bigger picture. We talked about that as far as integration management. But there's other plan documents that we're going to talk about. On page 78 of the beginner's guide, there's a whole list of, and we showed it on our chart earlier, whole list of planning processes. So what are some other plan documents that you would imagine? Yes, sir. Dave?
Ordering materials.
Okay, that's more of an activity as opposed to a plan, but good thought, good input. So what are some other plan documents, for example, that we might include in the project? Yes, sir, Andrew?
Like the schedule?
Yeah, the schedule itself, is a plan document as far as how long we think the project's going to take. When do we need the resources, et cetera. So you might have a project schedule would be a plan document that might be an addendum or an attachment to this overall project management plan. What are some other plan documents, Mike? Yeah, the budget itself. So you might have a cost plan, a budget, a good one. A couple more. How about, yes, sir? Zach?
A bill of materials.
That typically is a deliverable, and plan documents can be deliverables as well, project plan documents. But what was your answer again? I'm sorry.
Bill of materials.
Bill of materials. That's more of a product deliverable, and the activity on the project would be to develop the bill of materials list. Maybe part of that you've got other activities like to bring in, identify consultants or specialists to help you develop the bill of materials list. So that's more of a product deliverable. So I'm thinking more project deliverables. Good answer, though. Yes, sir. Patrick?
I guess like a team list and like proposed roles, I guess.
Yeah, like a resource management, a list of people with the skills. We call it a resource assignment matrix, or a RAM. We'll talk more about that during, I think, Chapter 9. So a staffing plan, in round numbers, a staffing plan. Who do we need? Do we need volunteers? What kind of skills are needed? When are they needed? So a staffing plan, a scope management plan, a schedule, a budget. So those are all what we often refer to as subsidiary documents or plan documents that would be part of the overall plan. So typically I start out with a high-level plan, and there's an approach section. And I'll warn you right now, the wording in there is done very well. I took that from an excellent source with permission. And so there's a section of the project management plan document that I captured that talks about the approach on how you're going to manage the project, how we're going to manage change, how we're going to manage the risk. So the approach that we're going to take to manage those key aspects of the project is very well written. The tendency is to just say, wow, I couldn't have said it better myself, and just to leave that section intact for this exercise. Don't do it. You look at it as far as a good example, but there's some fine print in that direction for that section that says, change the text to meet your project. So even though it says, change management meetings will be held weekly and, blah, 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 take that into consideration, but make sure that you make that plan document fit your project, okay? So you're going to need to basically fine-tune and customize those sections of your plan to make it fit your project, okay? And that's where sometimes students just say, wow, that looks good, and they leave it alone, and then they get marked down for, content because you're just accepting the work. So here's a sample list of things that you might see as far as tools and techniques. I made a really poor decision on a very large project, Procter & Gamble, many years ago. My decision as far as the tools, we were developing the project management plan, and I said, scheduling, very important. Let's use Microsoft Project. Several people on the team said, yeah, it's a great tool. It makes sense. Let's do it. By making that decision, I unwittingly found that was a huge cost to the project. Licenses for Microsoft Project at the time were $1,000 a pop. I started out with a core team of 12 people. Only 2 or 3 of us had Microsoft Project, the scheduling tool, the software product, the license. And so I had to go out and buy a bunch of licenses just to start the project. I had 38 team members on the project team. And at the time, I was going to have to buy 38 licenses at $1,000 a pop. Plus, the tool is very robust. Have you guys used Microsoft Project at all? Okay. It's very robust. And so there's certain training, that needed to take place. So all of a sudden, I just signed up to use a tool on my project. Sounded like a good idea at the time, but it's going to end up costing well over $50,000 for training and for licensing and all that stuff. So you need to be kind of cautious about tools and techniques that you're going to use. Nowadays, you can just use Microsoft Excel. Everyone has a copy. Or you can get maybe some shareware, from the internet or something that's low cost, that's similar in nature. So a lot of other tools. So a lot of things to think about when it comes to the project. Objectives, requirements, acceptance criteria. What constitutes, being done on this project? How do we know when we've arrived each step of the way? And typically that's done by some kind of a checkpoint, right? On a construction project, that's where your city inspectors come in and they review rough plumbing, sign here. Framework, rough electrical, sign here. So think of your project, in an organized fashion as a series of check marks. That's what we're striving for. What are those things that we need to do first, second, and third? And we'll talk more about that during schedule management. But so developing the plan. Content's clearly going to vary based on size, type, and complexity of your project. I walked into an audit with a 4-page project management plan. And the auditors laughed, kind of nudged one another. They said, we've got this guy. He doesn't have 4 pages. There can't be any meat and potatoes on that plan. But basically, I had hyperlinks. And my good friend, Dr. Gary Evans, that's how he builds a plan document. It's a series of links to other documents, to the charter, to the work breakdown structure, to the risk plan. And so I walked one of the 4-page series of hyperlinks that I popped up on my computer and said, here's my plan document, here's my charter, here's my risk management plan. And so at the end of the audit, they said, well, no findings. They said, you've got a plan and you're working the plan. They were able to go out and look at some of the documents that we had developed and that we're tracking along the way. Another very important aspect, keeping track. Where you at? Where are you at on the project? Are you on track? If not, why not? So things to think about. So developing the plan is really a series of actions necessary to define, integrate, keyword, coordinate all the subsidiary plans, as far as staffing. Are we going to be able to use volunteers? If so, what, do we need to train the volunteers or schedule them as well? This is just a sample of a 1-page kind of a plan at a glance. And I actually used this at IBM. I was asked to manage a project once, and I can't take credit for this, and one of my friends had kind of built this on a 1-page PowerPoint. And I loved it so much I got his permission to use it, and I presented it to my vice president on a project. And he said, yeah, this is great. He said, we've got the original scope, some key deliverables here. What I did is I customized this particular document to meet. I met with the director at the Budweiser Event Center, and I said, hey, let's take a project, let's build it up, and let's use the tool. And so, and here we've got check marks. In green means we met the date. Here's the dates of the check marks as far as our major milestones. And then here are the ones that need to be accomplished. This is key, upper right-hand corner, at a glance. Plan at a glance or status at a glance. How are we doing? We're in the green. That's a good thing, right? So traffic lights are very important. And then the initial is very important in case I print this out in black and white. Or in one case, I had a very powerful and very high-level manager as my project sponsor, and he was colorblind. So, the greens and yellows and reds, he couldn't see them as clearly. So he asked that I put the initial in the box. So, and at the program management level, I'm reviewing multiple projects, and you're reporting status. Boom, green, yellow, red. So this is a great way to kind of blast through in a fairly consistent manner, looking at multiple projects. IBM does this. They have 7 keys. PricewaterhouseCoopers uses 7 keys. And this is just kind of a summary level. Budget and assumptions, target, schedule, and risk, key stakeholders. Excuse me. So whatever works, if you can do it in one page and everybody agrees to that, then all the better, right? So that's one example. So the quick checkpoint. We are here. We completed the project proposal. You completed the project charter. You'll get your final sign-off within the week. Next step, developing the project management plan. After we do that, then you'll all work diligently. Starting next week starting next week and ending next week, we'll do the work breakdown structure on your projects. So keep an eye on that. Very important tool as far as planning. So you'll get a chance to do both of those. So we're here. So here's an example of a template. I've modified this a little bit to kind of fit the classroom environment. We talked about version control or history tracking. First draft complete, input from the team, final draft submitted. Executive or project level summary, a brief overview of the project. Now, you may notice, and this is important, so I need your attention, everyone. Okay. In a lot of these templates, these tools that we're using, you're going to see hyperlinks or hypertext. That's what you see here in blue. This says link to the project charter. For the classroom environment, you don't have to worry about the links. So some of these documents have multiple links. And I've had students go, wait a minute, what's this all about? So I'm telling you right now, disregard the links. You do not have to worry about those. Those are things that work very well on a real project, especially if you have an electronic project control book where you've got a Dropbox or a SharePoint server where you've got project folders, and you've got all these documents that exist within an electronic database. We call it a project management information system. And you've got these plan documents, you've got your output, your tracking documents along the way. And very often we link to those through hyperlinks. So in the classroom, you don't need to worry about the links. Okay, everybody okay with that? Good. So here's another hyperlink to the scope statement. So you don't need to worry about those. So you're gonna write down a brief summary of your project. Business or project objectives. Business objectives are slightly different than project objectives. The new role of the project manager is very strategic in nature. This is one of the biggest changes that occurred just a year ago through PMI. Their view of the project manager is more like a program manager. Looking at the strategic, where does the project fit in to the overall scheme? If you're working on a design project for the Fire Safe Community Center, or if you're working on a fundraising project, that's where you focus your energies. That's what that project is all about. But if you tie to business objectives, we've got the bigger picture. As far as that fundraiser is to help fund our design and our construction of the Fire Safe Community Center in this example. So your project very often is strategic in nature. It fits into a bigger picture. Very, very often is the case. So PMI is saying, well, the role of the project manager is really to be more involved in the business objectives. Business objectives might be to increase profit, to develop new products within your company, to increase customer awareness. So those are results that we touched on briefly, and those are business objectives: higher profit, higher market share, more brand recognition is another term that's often used. So the business objectives are the bigger picture. Like Lockheed Martin's, their view of this series of projects is to really come up with a design to help communities, against wildfires. So their ultimate goal, the business objectives, is to be able to help sponsor a new design for buildings that would be more fire safe. So it's the bigger picture. Clearly, they want to reduce the loss of life and injury and things like that. But they're looking at the bigger picture. Those are what we often call business objectives, as opposed to just the project objective, which is to raise a certain amount of money. Okay? And then you've got the scope statement, brief overview of the project scope, what's in scope, what's out of scope, and we'll talk more about that during scope management starting next week. But this is kind of the high-level approach. Okay? So this is just an example of the template that you'll be using. It's out there in D2L. Here's the source. from my good friend Gary Evans. So the assumption is next you're going to have a plan. So let's just kind of fast forward through what happens after you've got a plan in place. Clearly you want to direct and manage the work. This is the work, the plan part. This is the primary process of carrying out the work, the activities, the meeting, the deliverables. Project manager often directs the work of the project. You're like a air traffic controller. We played the game of Pictionary, so it's all about getting things done, right? Making sure you have the right staff with the right training and so on. Collecting status reports and reporting the progress of your project. A lot of things that happen as far as getting the work done. Next, you want to monitor and control the work. This is where you track the performance, you review the progress, you report the status. And you're going to I think we took that exercise out. Actually, there was an exercise to report status. We'll do that at the end of the semester for sure. But typically, when you're monitoring and controlling, is this something we do the beginning, middle, or end of the project?
Middle.
Say again? Throughout. Good job, Alex. So monitoring and control is something we do throughout the project life cycle, not just at the beginning or middle or end. This is something that we do throughout the project life cycle. You're constantly monitoring, even if you're initiating the project or you're executing the work, you're constantly monitoring and controlling on the way. So you're comparing plan versus actual. We'll talk about earned value in Chapter 7. Is there corrective action that needs to take place? Do we need to make adjustments? Things like that. So the mac and cheese for forecasting, both cost and schedule, if we're not on track, what do we need to do to get us back on track? Then it's change control. Change is inevitable except from a vending machine, right, Gage? So change is inevitable. You can't just say no to change because change can be good. So change can be a positive outcome for your project. So we'll talk more about change control later as well, but very important. So you can't just be stubborn on change because it can give you positive results. It's something you want to do throughout the life cycle. It's constantly being on the lookout. Your team members may say, "Hey, project manager, we need to change the way we organize this particular test, or we need to change the way we review the outcomes or the progress with our customers." So change comes in many, many forms from many sources. And this is ultimately going to be a knowledge area in itself. Currently, it's just a process, but change management, I found personally on projects is major. Managing change, it helps us avoid scope creep or scope leap. This is a way to look at better ways to do things because sometimes it makes sense and it's the right thing to do. Controlling constraints, updating your scope, cost, and schedule based on approved changes. Okay? Here's a sample, and I actually use this on a real project, a sample flow chart of a change process. This is what I call the short version. Basically, it's 3 primary steps. The request form can be in a Word doc or whatever. Then you log it. Could be in an Excel spreadsheet. Then it goes through a review and approval cycle. And then you either install the change if approved. But even if it's deferred, typically there's 3 responses to a change request: accepted, declined, or deferred. And in any of those 3 cases, you have to document and communicate the results of that particular change. Okay? I worked on a project in Portland, Oregon, and we weren't even 3 weeks into the project, and changes were just flying. Matter of fact, the project's executive said that he felt like the earth was moving beneath our feet. Was his quote. He said, changes are coming at an enormous rate from the customer, from various customer managers, et cetera. So tons of change. Within the first 3 weeks, we said, you know what, something's got to give here. This is a bit extreme. So we called a team together, about 15 team members at the time. We ordered pizza and pop, and we just sat down and collected all of the change requests that had come through from different customers to different team members. So that's the first problem right there. You don't want changes coming in randomly, right? So you want to have some change control, some change management process. So we got the team together, ordered pizza and pop, sat down and captured all the changes that had come through from the different team members. And we had 8 pages on an Excel spreadsheet, single line entries. So we put together this tracking sheet, much like what I'm going to show you here next. And we put together an Excel spreadsheet, entered the change request, who requested it, what do they want, when do they want it. And we had 8 pages in 3 weeks. And so we implemented a simple change process. The customer said, hey, great job, this is exactly what we need. That's why we hired you folks. This is why we're paying you the big bucks. We want somebody to help organize, and manage the project. And the only way you can do that effectively is manage the change. And so we implemented this 3-step process. Customer embraced it. Well, in 3 months, the changes had continued to flow. And we were up to 40 pages. This is in the textbook. Did any of you remember reading the story? You may not have gotten to it yet, but it's probably under scope management. But the big thing here was that the changes were just totally distracting the team. We're very much bogged down in all the changes. And so I'll kind of leave the punchline to you to read in the book, and we'll talk about it again later too. But at the end of the day, we had an enormous number of changes. So one thing that I mentioned there was a key problem. Anyone remember what that was? Just in the discussion here in the last couple of minutes. One red flag should have popped up. I think you picked up on it. You were kind of nodding your head when I mentioned it.
Organized?
Yeah?
Organized with
Okay.
change.
Yeah, a lot of these changes are coming through. They're coming from different managers to different team members. So what's the red flag there? Anybody? Yes?
Project manager doesn't have a complete idea of what's going on.
Exactly right. Good job, Dave. When you've got changes coming at you from all directions, from different people, you're out of control. You really are. And the project manager ultimately needs to be in control. So as the project manager, what I did is I put this change process in place. We had a meeting. We documented the minutes to the meeting, and basically the customer accepted the change process. But they continued to throw more and more changes at us. So, I'll save the punchline for later, but you need a plan. Here's what the Excel spreadsheet looks like. This is from our good friend Gary Evans. Basically there's a link to where the change request form resides. It's usually electronic. What is it that needs to be changed? Who requested the change? When do they want it, and why? Is it to solve a problem? Is it to streamline a process or whatever? So, the 5 W's are often something that you want to take into consideration when it comes to change. Okay? Then, at some point, hopefully everything's gone well and it's time to close out the project or phase. Oftentimes we end up just closing out a phase, like the design phase, the construction, the implementation, the test phase, the training. So very often we break projects into phases, which is a great thing to do. So closing out the project or phase, this is where you're looking for formal acceptance, you're looking for sign-off on whether or not the project is complete, making sure that you archive the documents and that you maintain the records. And again, we'll talk a lot more about closing the project toward the end of the semester. Okay? A lot of things to think about. And I would submit to you that closing a project is and often should be considered a project in itself. This is that closing process group, many things that need to be considered. And at the end of the day, formal acceptance is what we hope. Are all of the deliverables complete? And get the customer kind of nodding their head in the right direction. And then you get that sign here. And in IBM, we actually had a project acceptance form. It was a 1-page, and we would kind of summarize the deliverables that were met, the target dates, and then we would ask the customer to sign the acceptance form that says the project is hereby complete. And it's not, customers they're not always willing to sign off on the project, especially if it went well. It's like they've got all these other ideas they want you to kind of add on. So very often when we get what's called the never-ending project, and it's why they want phase 2, phase 3, phase 3. They want more and more features. They want all of these extras. So it's very difficult to bring a project to closure And so we'll talk again more about that toward the end of the semester. Questions on the processes? There are 6. Chapter 4.6 is the final process and integration management. So we're still in project integration management as a knowledge area, and we just kind of blasted through all of the 6 processes. Okay, questions? Make sense? Okay, all right. So, in summary, integration management really brings all the knowledge areas together. It looks across all the process groups. There are currently 6 processes. That's going to 7 later this year. Be aware of the importance of lessons learned. Very often at the end of a project, what we want to do is have a lessons learned meeting. And just ask ourselves as a team, what worked, what didn't, what can we or what should we do different next time around. So very important steps, lessons learned. And then, the record retention process. But keep in mind that integration management is a team sport. But you may see a quiz, if you haven't already, a quiz question that says whose role or whose job is it to be the primary integrator of the project? And the answer would be project manager, right? Good job. So that's summarizing integration management. It's a very important knowledge area, a lot to be considered, a lot involved. Again, early in the project life cycle, looking across the whole project, it's harder to close. Sometimes even before the work begins, it's thinking about how we're going to manage this project, okay? So very important. And one of the key deliverables is going to be the project management plan. Speaking of which, the acting project manager for this week, you're going to develop a project management plan. The assumption is your project is approved. Next step, develop the plan. You've got a template, a plan document out there. And really the focus of this document is how are we going to manage this project? Are we going to have formal change control? How often are we going to meet? What tools are we going to use? So kind of keep that focus as best you can without getting too distracted with the project itself. So you're going to kind of start off. Some of the information that you've developed as a team for your charter could easily port over to the plan. But the plan is a slightly different view of the world. The view that we're now taking, the charter is, here's the big picture of the project, sign here. The plan is, here's how we're going to manage the project, sign here. So there should always be that sign-off at the end, those approvers at the end. And I'm the program manager, so I should review and approve all documents. Remember I mentioned earlier in the lecture, you want to make sure your team number is in type or in the document. Make sure your name is in there as the acting project manager. And then my name is the program manager, and clearly we're going to have a representative from Lockheed Martin as a reviewer as well. They're the sponsor, right? Okay, questions? Okay, so also we've got quiz 3 coming up noon next week. And the reading assignment for next week is Chapter 5, Scope Management. Okay. Now, what we're going to do, and I found this to be helpful, I used to do scope management over a 2-week period. And I had an additional exercise in there to develop what we call a scope statement. But the scope statement is very similar to what you'll actually start creating as part of the project management plan. So based on feedback from previous students, based on time availability, things like that, I've chosen to give you folks a break. And so I'm not going to ask you to do a scope statement as an exercise. Okay, so you've got one less team exercise to do. Yay! And by doing that, we'll be able to consolidate scope management into a single lecture, which, wait for it, gets you out of the semester a week early. And since there's no final exam, then there's a double plus, right? So I know what I've found in this class is you either get it or you don't. So by the end of the semester, that final exam is really just a confirmation. So I like the quizzes along the way. I like to grade the exercises along the way. And then the other thing I found is by the time you get to the end of the semester, you've got other final exams going on and all of the other distractions. So I've just found that everyone sleeps a little easier and not worrying about one more final exam. So, okay. So there's the homework assignment. Any questions on the homework? Okay. Yes, Mary.
Do we have a new project manager?
Yes. So starting tonight for the next week, you've got a new acting project manager. Okay, good question. And then next week, we'll, the plan is to rotate that position most every week. There's one exception. Once we hit time management, the acting PM will go over a 2-week period. Okay, but most every other case, the acting PM goes for 1 week. Questions? All right. So let's back up, or excuse me, let's do the team. So to give you, and here's the emphasis I placed earlier on, including team numbers. So I want to give you the next 20, 30 minutes to get together, back together as a team, and to just start talking about your project management plan. The document's out in D2L, so go ahead and pick your acting project manager for the week. And here's the exercise. So the PM is going to facilitate collecting information, finalizing the document. There's some additional information out in the textbook. And then the acting PM will post the team's final plan to PCB number 1 folder. Questions on the team exercise? Questions? Alrighty. So let's take the next, we'll checkpoint in about 20 minutes, see how you're doing. If you need a little extra time, we can roll until 8 o'clock. But I think at this point it's just a matter of getting your heads together, kind of get things rolling. Make sure you've got your acting PM assigned, and then we'll checkpoint in 20 minutes, okay? So go ahead and pause the recording, please. Okay, thank you. And we may turn the recording back on for the debrief at 10 minutes till the hour.
Totally
so
kidding.
Take a break.
I'm just getting in on that.
Okay, let's regroup. You can keep your seats. I just want to ask a little bit about the exercise. Everyone clear on the assignment, first of all? You're going to develop a project management plan document. This is one of many of the deliverables as a project manager. You're going to want to, you and the team are going to develop these project documents along the way. Again, it's a hypothetical project. We're focusing on the different tools that we need to get the project completed. So we're focusing mostly on the project. Clearly, you need the product of the project. The big check at the end of the fundraising event, or the ribbon cutting ceremony for the build team, the design documents for the design team. Those are your primary deliverables along the way. But we're really focusing mostly on the project and how do I manage the project. Ultimately, staffing requirements, funding. We'll talk more about that during cost management and so on. Think about who your customer is. Think about, how do you know when you've reached the end of the project? So be thinking about what we call completion criteria or acceptance criteria. Think a lot about what is the purpose of this project. And then next week we're going to roll up our sleeves and actually get into the work breakdown structure. We're going to start breaking the project into manageable chunks or categories of work. For example, on the fundraising team or on the build team, volunteers. The assumption is we need to do this on a budget. So, volunteers from within the community would be a great resource for us. So one category of work for the build team and for the fundraising teams are going to be you're going to develop a volunteer management plan on how in the world we're going to manage the volunteers. Activities that we're going to start talking about next week are going to be things like identifying the number of volunteers required, how we're going to train the volunteers, how we're going to have to schedule the volunteers, feed them, things like that. So a category of work might be managing, or developing a volunteer management plan. So we manage the volunteers, we manage our architect on the design teams, we manage. So we break, the goal going into next week is really to figure out how we're going to break this project up into manageable chunks, manageable categories. Maybe it's plan the event, conduct the event, and then clean up after. So that's what we're going to focus on next week. So read chapter 5. But just before we close, any questions, again, any last minute questions on the exercise, the deliverable for this next week? Everybody's got your acting project manager assigned, right? Okay, so the deliverable is going to be the project management plan document. Again, it should fit your project. Customize it to appropriately fit your project. Any other questions, thoughts? extraneous outbursts? All right. Well, see you next week. Okay, go ahead and end the lecture.